This is the next video in the chapter on stoichiometry of chemical equations. We are moving on to the types of chemical reactions because we can put chemical reactions into several broad classes to help us identify their major features. So chemical reactions. Can be broadly grouped into three major categories. We are going to talk about the first category today, and we'll talk about the other two categories in the next lecture. So the first category, for no particular reason, is precipitation reactions. You may or may not have heard the word precipitation before. In this type of reaction, you start out with dissolved substances. And one or more of these dissolved substances reacts to form a solid, or solids sometimes. So that's what we'll look at in a minute. The second type of reaction is acid-base reactions. This is one we've all heard of before. In this type of reaction, a hydrogen ion, also called a proton, because it doesn't have any neutrons or electrons, a proton is transferred from one substance to another. So it's like a trade. Specifically from an acid to a base. More on that later. The third type of reaction is called redox. Its formal name is oxidation reduction reactions. But oxidation reduction takes too long to write. So we took the first syllable of each word and smooshed it together and called it redox. So this type of reaction is also a trade, but instead of trading protons, we are trading electrons. Electrons are transferred from one substance to another in a redox reaction. There we are. So we'll start out with precipitation, and you may have seen precipitation before. You may have seen it called double displacement or double replacement is another way that we can call it. And we'll write its description here just for the sake of having good notes, because the other sections won't all be on the same page as the first page. Dissolved substances react to form solids. And this type of reaction, precipitation, is for reactions involving only ionic compounds. So when we learn to write net ionic equations in the last video, we are going to need to use those for these precipitation reactions, which also involve only ionic compounds. So you're probably with several precipitation reactions in your real life, even if you may not know it. So you may have seen precipitation reactions before as the formation of coral reefs. Coral reefs are formed from dissolved solutes that precipitate out into a solid. Or you may have had a grandparent or an older relative who had a kidney stone, or even a pet can have a kidney stone. Kidney stones are precipitation reactions as well from chemicals in your blood. So precipitations are all about forming solids. So we need to be able to decide when a solid is going to form. And the condition that we use to decide that is called solubility. And this is about solutions. We talked about solutions as a solute described in a solvent. So this characteristic, solubility, is the maximum concentration of solute that is dissolvable in a solvent. So solubility is a property of a particular compound, and that property, that solubility, can be low or it can be high. And we have different words to describe each of those cases. So when the solubility of a compound is high, we say that that compound is soluble, that lots of that solute can dissolve in the solvent. An example of something like salt. You can dissolve lots and lots of salt in a glass of water. So when you have something very soluble, the solute will dissolve and it will form a solution. This is the condition we talked about a few lectures ago. At the other end of the spectrum, if you have some sort of a compound that is not very soluble, like silver chloride, we are going to call this insoluble. Silver chloride is an insoluble salt. And when something is insoluble and it's placed in water, it will precipitate. And precipitate is the chemistry word for forming a solid. And this word precipitate can be both a noun referring to the solid itself or a verb referring to the process of forming that solid. So we're going to look at a set of rules that we can use to decide whether a particular compound is going to form a precipitate or not. And then we're going to do a few examples of that, and we're going to do those in the next video.